more context to the situation. I'm going to use a very inappropriate example. I apologize if I offend anybody with this. Let's say there's a coworker who's very attractive, my type. Okay. And you can get that desire to just grab their anatomy. You get that desire, like just, and I want to. We'll get there. I want to, but we're at Lincoln Tech. That's not true. I don't have to consciously tell myself, no. No. That's not appropriate. That is inner desire being regulated by subconscious. But let's say this coworker, how's it going? And now you're thinking, can I afford to get fired? That rationalization is the superego. And that is how they all interplay with each other. And that applies to anything driven by inner desire. Like, let's say you have a friend, neighbor, spouse, whatever, who really pisses you off. And you get that inner desire to punch them in the face. You know what that feels like? You just want to be there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But you don't typically have to tell yourself don't punch them in the face. Sometimes that consciousness needs to be, but generally speaking, I just realized my noise is like used for multiple things. So, grab sexual assaults, right? so that some barely conscious control that it's not okay to punch somebody, versus when you get really angry and you gotta tell yourself, okay, I will not do well in prison. Not in prison. You gotta walk away. You start to talk yourself out of it. That's the super ego. What?
No, so then you start to tell yourself that battery third degree just gets you a PTA.
Gotcha. I promise you up here. Got it. Give me a second. So this is the interaction. The only thing that does not change in life, and this is one of Freud's big things, is the if. Your inner desires are your inner desires. Doesn't matter. I'm not about to condone what I'm about to say. But this is the psychological theory that explains, doesn't justify, explains really bad behavior when people are intoxicated. Why? Because the ego gets drowned out. You don't rationally talk to yourself when you're highly intoxicated, at least I don't. Your decision making goes away, and what do you end up doing? Some stupid shit. So a co-worker who's, after a few drinks, like, what's the worst that can happen? So when we talk about the mind and alterations and how to get into your deep conscious, the ego and the superego, your decision making, contextualization, can fade away with drugs. It can change over time. Rules change. Things that were appropriate in the workplace back in the 40s and 50s could probably grab somebody and know about 9. They'd say thank you. Because that's what Matt seemed like. But nowadays can't do that. The more important part of Freud was this notion of defense mechanisms. And this is a stopping point where we have to say, you, in their chapter 5 and in your ATI, there is a list of defense mechanisms. And those are critically important that you know them. We'll watch a video on them that helps to explain and helps to alleviate my going on and on. But the notion is me explain it a second. You can see the defense mechanisms. They make sense. But defense mechanisms are not considered bad at all. But they come up to a set of terms, that are critical to get right now. Because we're going to use these terms all the time in this course. And the terms are, let's start over here. Emotion-focused coping and problem-focused coping. These are my phrases and some other phrases from other references in nursing textbooks. So, you're still defense mechanisms only deal with the emotion, not what's causing it. And 90% of the time, we are going to want to minimize emotion-focused line. A student is very anxious for their upcoming exam. Which of the following is the best coping strategy? Going on Instagram, watching reels of Labubu's, having a pint of vodka, going out playing with your friends, or studying for the exam. And what we would say is, most of them are emotional because they distract or minimize the emotion that anxiety, whether that's through denial or depression or those. Anxiety about the exam, studying for it is more problem solving, problem. There are another set of terms that are going to come up in later chapters that are important to address now. Effective coping and ineffective. I'm putting a line between these. They do not connect. It is not appropriate for us to say either of these are effective or ineffective. Effective coping is addressing the problem to rid the psychological ailments that's causing that problem. Ineffective coping is a long-term inability to deal with the stressor and the emotions that are coming. For example, someone who is struggling with the loss of, let's say, their spouse, and let's say child, even worse. A person is dealing with the loss of their child. Yeah, you got a little bit of that. Does that person cope with that loss? No. So we would say that is a series of ineffective coping because there is an over-reliance on defense mechanisms. We're going to talk about this again, maybe today. But this isn't. There are times when emotion-focused coping is perfectly acceptable. It is the overall destination of problem solving at some point. So let's say I get an email stressing me out. And I'm like, what? I deal with this. I'm about here. I'll look at that email. So I go and have a meeting and ignore that email ever happened. That is a defense mechanism. If I'm going to go back to it later, then we get to problem solving. It's just like when people are in the middle of Stop and Shop and get some bad news. You can't necessarily solve the problem right then and there. Sometimes you need defense mechanisms to get you to a point where you can. What I want to do is quickly show a video about defense mechanisms. And as noted, many of the videos we show are in, Blackboard? Canvas?
I ordered 200 hand-forged knives for my dorm room and built a Wix website to sell them. I'm Noah Rosen, founder and owner of Forged to Table Knives. Working my way out through the culinary.
Denial. Denial is when a person refuses to accept the reality about something because it's too uncomfortable or painful to acknowledge. They ignore what's really happening around them and come up with their own made-up reasons to avoid facing the truth. A heavy smoker may deny the evidence that smoking is harmful to their health, or imagine someone drowning in debt because they spend too much money on fancy clothes. Instead of admitting they have a problem, they keep buying more expensive clothes, saying things like, I deserve to treat myself, or I'll figure out the money stuff later. Repression. Repression involves subconsciously pushing distressing thoughts, memories, impulses, or feelings into the unconscious mind, making them inaccessible to conscious awareness. A person who experienced a traumatic event in childhood might have no conscious memory of the event because their mind has buried it deep down, even though they were conscious and aware during the event. They may have vague feelings of unease or anxiety without understanding why. Projection. Projection occurs when a person attributes their own unacceptable thoughts, feelings, or impulses to someone else, usually without realizing it. Someone who struggles with jealousy might accuse their partner of being jealous and controlling, when in reality, it's their own feelings of jealousy that they're projecting onto their partner. They might say,
projection, I'm going to stop at some of the really common ones. Projection is very common. We love to blame someone else for everything wrong. This happens all the time. Where something bad happens, you look at who you can blame instead of taking responsibility. Taking responsibility is hard, but that's part of the problem-solving process. Saying it was someone else's fault, that is a defense mechanism.
You're always so suspicious of me. Why can't you trust me? Or a cheating spouse might accuse their partner of being unfaithful. Displacement. Displacement is when someone takes out their feelings on someone or something else,
Another common
rather
one.
than dealing with the actual source of those feelings. After a tough day at work, someone might come home and snap at their family members or pets over minor things because they're feeling stressed and frustrated from work.
That was out when I was in nursing school. The example they would use for this is you could get home after a bad day and you kick your dog.
Oh my God.
Work, but can't express those feelings there. Reaction formation. This defense mechanism manifests when someone behaves in a way that's opposite to how they truly feel, because expressing their true feelings is too anxiety-provoking or unacceptable. Someone who harbors strong feelings of dislike towards a coworker might go out of their way to be overly friendly. Response to stress or anxiety serves as a way of protecting. A college student facing overwhelming academic pressure might look to their parents for comfort and support in a way they haven't done since childhood. In a younger child, a stressful event may cause it to regress to bedwetting, even though they have already outgrown this behavior. Rationalization. Rationalization are seemingly logical explanations, facts, or justifications for behaviors, thoughts, or feelings actually driven by unconscious motives or desires. After a breakup, someone might rationalize their ex-partner's behavior by saying they were never right for me anyway, to avoid confronting their own feelings of rejection and sadness. Someone who steals something feels justified in doing so because they need one redirects their unacceptable impulses, or when someone takes a critical voice and constantly criticize themselves, even when the parent isn't present and without conscious realization of this process. Splitting. Splitting involves viewing people, situations, or things as either all good or all bad, with no middle ground or nuance. Someone might see their boss as either a perfect, flawless leader or a completely incompetent tyrant, without acknowledging any complexity or gray areas. It's like painting everything with just two colors, no shades in between. This often happens in borderline personality disorder. Compensation. Compensation involves overemphasizing or focusing on strengths or abilities in one area to make up for perceived deficiencies or failures in another. Someone who feels insecure about their physical appearance might become overly focused on their academic achievements or career success to compensate for their perceived shortcomings. Another example is a student who receives poor grades and devotes more time and effort to extracurricular activities. Undoing. Undoing is attempting to reverse or negate an unacceptable thought, feeling, or action through symbolic gestures or rituals. After snapping at a friend in anger, someone might apologize profusely and go out their way to do something nice for them as a way to undo harm afterward. It's like the defense mechanism, reaction formation. But there's a difference. Reaction formation is pretending to
Imagine being able to build anything just by thinking about it. Deep Base 44, a complete AI.
feel the opposite of how you really feel. While undoing involves actions to undo a negative action or feeling. Intellectualization. Intellectualization involves focusing excessively on abstract thinking, overanalyzing or rationalization to avoid confronting or experiencing the emotions associated with a painful situation. This mechanism kicks in to block out conflicting or disturbing feelings and thoughts. So instead of acknowledging their feelings of grief after a loved one's death, someone might focus solely on organizing the funeral arrangements and discussing logistical details. Suppression. Suppression is consciously pushing unwanted thoughts, feelings, or memories out of conscious awareness, as opposed to repression, which is a subconscious process. It's like putting a lid on your feelings for now, so you can deal with them later when you're ready. It's considered a form of motivated forgetting. During a stressful exam, someone might consciously push aside distracting thoughts about a recent argument with a friend so they can focus on studying. Dissociation. Dissociation involves mentally separating oneself from thoughts, feelings, memories, or even identity as a way to escape or avoid overwhelming or traumatic experiences. It's like mentally checking out for a while to avoid feeling upset. During a traumatic event, someone might feel like they're watching the scene unfold from outside their body, as if it's happening to someone else. Dissociation is considered neurotic, but fairly common in adults. Conversion. Conversion, also called sensitization, involves expressing psychological distress through physical symptoms or ailments, often with no identifiable medical cause. An example is experiencing sudden paralysis or blindness in response to stress or trauma, despite no apparent physical injury or medical explanation. This defense mechanism is often seen in conversion disorder, which is also referred to as functional neurological disorder. Avoidance. Avoidance or withdrawal is when someone deliberately avoids thinking about, discussing, or confronting a situation, thought, feeling, or memory that causes discomfort or distress. It also entails avoiding persons, events, and places, ignoring phone calls from a creditor, or avoiding opening bills to avoid facing the reality of mounting debt and financial troubles is one example. This defense mechanism can also be observed in post-traumatic stress disorder, where individuals may avoid the location of a traumatic accident or refrain from driving altogether. Acting out. Acting out is when individuals express their unconscious emotions, wishes, or impulses through their actions rather than consciously verbalizing them. It is also when people do things without realizing why they're doing them. It's like their emotions are driving their actions, but don't understand why. For example, someone might act out their anger by yelling or breaking things instead of talking about what's bothering them. Temper tantrums of toddlers can also be understood as episodes of acting out, since they haven't developed the means to communicate their feelings yet. Isolation of affect. Isolation of affect is when someone disconnects their emotions from their thoughts or experiences. It's like talking about something sad or scary without feeling any sadness or fear. For example, if someone talks about a traumatic event, like their house burning down, and describes it very detailed and graphical without showing any emotion, it might be because they've isolated their feelings from the memory. It's like they're describing it as if it happened to someone else. This can happen in conditions like obsessive-compulsive disorder, or in people who've been through very traumatic events. And there you have them, the major defense mechanisms explained. Hit that like button on there if you got any value out of this video. Consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss out on any future videos. See you in the next one.
So
Guess which hasn't better?
hopefully some of these you realized are, oh yeah, oh yeah, so does that. These are common behaviors. Defense mechanisms are not about patients, psychiatric patients. They're about mental function. And they're key components of our justice at least. To keep us going, I'm going to skip over. Um, oh. Sometimes some don't simply booze. All right, let's take a break. We'll see you guys then.